Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's academic webinar. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here as we share something very special. A brand new open educational case study developed in collaboration with one of Gurobi's most inspiring social partners, ESUPS, the Emergency Supply Prepositioning Strategy. Today's spotlight is on STOCKHOLM, a powerful visual and analytical tool developed by ESUPS to coordinate emergency relief stock across humanitarian organizations globally. It's designed to increase visibility, reduce duplication, and ultimately help shorten response times when disasters strike. This project is a part of Gurobi Gives Back, our initiative to provide free, unrestricted licenses to qualifying nonprofit organizations working to achieve at least one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're incredibly proud to support ESUPS in their mission, and even more excited to help tell their story in a way that can empower the next generation of optimization professionals. We know from many of you, our academic community, that there's a growing need for more comprehensive case studies that bring together real-world business context, sample data, and walkthroughs of optimization models. That's why this collaboration is so exciting. Together with ESUPS, we've developed a flexible, open educational resource that allows students and instructors to explore core optimization topics through the lens of a truly impactful mission-driven challenge, improving humanitarian logistics and disaster response. Through this case, learners can engage with the real-world data, math, and code behind the STOCKHOLM optimization model, the logistics challenges ESUPS tackles globally, and even a look at the sample production-ready code that powers this critical platform in the field. Whether you're teaching, learning, or researching optimization, this case offers a meaningful way to bring classroom theory to life. This is also a great moment to thank the many collaborators who made this case possible. From the Gurobi team, our intern, Ben Rapkin, and from our technical teams, Jerry, Ronald, and Mario, from ESUPS, Florent, and the entire team, and the project's academic advisor, Jason Asimovich, a longtime ESUPS partner who provided thoughtful input as the case came together. Today's session marks the soft launch of this case study. We hope you'll explore it fully and share your feedback so that we can continue improving it as an educational asset with the hope to fully release it in midsummer. It's designed to offer a complete end-to-end view into a real business problem, the complexities of operating at a global scale, and the process of building and refining an optimization model from concept to production. A heartfelt thank you to ESUPS once again, not just for your vital work in the humanitarian space, but for your shared commitment to education and to inspiring new learners through this incredible story of optimization for good. And now I'm honored to hand things over to Florent, project manager at ESUPS, who will tell us more about the STOCKHOLM platform and the important work ESUPS is doing around the world. Florent, over to you.
In today's session, my name is Florent Chane. I've spent the last 25 years of my career doing humanitarian logistics. Initially mostly responding to crisis, on the ground, coordinating, reacting, delivering as much as feasible. But over time and from experience to experience, I've started to shift more and more from response to preparedness. And the reason is because I saw how much more impact we can have when we collaborate early, when we plan ahead, and when we use data to guide us in the decision-making process before the disaster hits. So let me take you a little bit back to give you a bit of background. After every large response operation, the industry carries out what we call the lessons learned exercise. It brings all the people that have been, or agencies that have been involved into the response. They come around the table and they discuss what worked, what didn't work, and what we can improve next time. I've attended many of them through the many disaster responses I led or participated to. And every single time, among the first 2 or 3 feedback that was given, was one which said, we don't know what stock we have available in country, we don't know who owns it, we don't know where it is. And the frustrating reason behind it is that the humanitarian actors were not talking to each other. So in a country, UNICEF doesn't know what the Red Cross stock is, the Red Cross doesn't know what Oxfam stock is, and more importantly, generally the government, who is responsible and whose mandate it is to lead the response in their own country, are the least informed about what stock they have in their country. They don't know about the stock of anybody. So they're not equipped adequately to make informed decisions about driving the response in their own country. Another consideration for you, to give you a bit of background, is that around 75% of humanitarian aid costs are logistic and supply chain related. And the larger chunk of this come from relief item procurement costs. So considering the lack of optimization I mentioned before, you can see how much there's a huge space here for optimization, for sharing information about what, where, and who has what, and how. And if we don't have this information, how can we even start optimizing anything? Let me give you a concrete example, and then I'll get a bit more into the background of the webinar. An example in Nepal. Through our model, which I'll show you hopefully a bit later, we've run analysis, and this shows that 90% of the emergency stock is stored in Kathmandu, the capital. But at the same time, 90% of the disaster happening in the country happens in the outer provinces. So every year the snow melts from the Himalayas after winter, and it runs down the plain, and every year the southwestern provinces get flooded. There's nothing new under the sun. People used to that. They understand it's a natural cycle. So we preposition stock to be ready to respond. But the stock is in Kathmandu, most of it. So if you need 2 or 3 days to reach the affected area from Kathmandu, because it's flooded, and then you need to find boat, and then you need to unload from the truck, load to the boat, then reach out to the affected people stranded into flooded areas, by that time you surely have missed the first 36 critical hours, which is where most of the deaths related to disaster happen. It's mostly during this first 36 hours. So in that case, the question is, what's the point of spending time and resources on prepositioning stock if that doesn't help us saving lives, which is what our job is meant to be. In 2015, when the earthquake hit Nepal, Kathmandu's airport was partially destroyed, with the runway unusable for a few weeks, and the 2 main roads coming from India were damaged or blocked. So access was really complicated and highlighted the critical importance of prepositioned stock to start responding to the need of the people. And in addition, part of the central stockpile in Kathmandu was either buried, damaged, or inaccessible because Kathmandu was the epicenter of the earthquake. So that was a painful reminder that without strategic prepositioning and coordination, our best intentions fall short or sometimes even become completely useless. All these experiences led to the creation of 2 parallel projects. First, ESUPS, Emergency Supply Prepositioning Strategy. It's an initiative launched in 2017 on a collaborative nature, bringing together NGOs, UN agencies, the Red Cross movement, and academics. And the goal was to help define global strategy stockpile. There's global stockpiles located in Kuala Lumpur for the Asia-Pacific region, in Dubai for the Eastern Africa, and in Panama for the Americas. To schematize a bit more, there's a bit more than this, but roughly that's what it is. And they needed to define a strategy as to what to preposition those hubs. So they developed ESUPS project, and to do that they work with Professor Jason Asimovich from Penn State University and Mr. Jared Gonzel from director of the MIT Humanitarian Lab, and together they developed a model, but for the model to work they needed information about the availability on stocks. Now, at the same time, I was at the time World Food Program Regional Director for the Pacific, and from all these expenses I mentioned before, I decided to create a system to map existing stock from the partners in the Pacific region. And I started with an Excel spreadsheet because I'm from a generation where Google was not a verb. So I used what I knew, which was Excel spreadsheet, and I was sending that to 120 partners every month. Now, every month, 120 partners were sending me back their own Excel spreadsheets filled with their stock information without changing the name. You can imagine how that make my life easier. And then I was literally copy-pasting from this 120 Excel spreadsheet into one central one that I was then feeding into what was the beginning of Google Map at the time, was giving me a map that I could share with partners. All this with no technical platforms, no developer, just a strong belief that this work was necessary. And we were also battling other complexities around misconception and trust. There's a lot of trust issues in our industry, from the NGOs to the UN, from the UN to the government, from the government to the different humanitarian actors, very often, from my experience, based on misconception, but nonetheless, that was a reality. So that's when these two projects came together. We decided to merge the two, and the Palm platform became the Stockholm platform and became a regional project, a global project ambition. And it's become a platform that can support both national and international prepositioning strategy definition. So Stockholm is a data-powered platform designed to improve stock visibility and coordination, and it's using to do that optimization and data science. Its aim is to reduce cost and, more importantly, save time during crisis, as mentioned before, two of the most critical resources during crisis time. It has not been easy, to be honest. We've been told many times it just couldn't be done. And also, we were, and we are still, challenging decades of institutional habits, asking agencies and people to give up a bit of control for the sake of greater efficiency. When you do your own strategy in your own corner, you don't owe anything to anybody, and so you have full control. When we start asking people to be a bit more interdependent to each other, you lose a bit control and you gain efficiency. And this is trade-off, which is really complicated to manage. But now, 6 years down the track, we have the Stockholm platform. It's live, it's unique. I believe it's indispensable because no other system provides this information to the industry. And as of now, it's used by close to 800 users, updating their stock on a regular basis from 125 agencies in 60 countries. I will try to show you briefly what it looks like so that you have a bit of an idea. So this is the Stockholm platform. You will see here we have, I'll show you first the stock mapping. So here is the stock. You can, I'll just show you if I select all countries. You can see you can select organization, agency. You can put all sorts of filter, and then you should search for your stock. And when you do that, you have a map, and depending on what you've been searching, you have a stock report telling you how many blankets you have. So you see here I've selected the whole world and all agencies, and we have around close to 2 million blanket preposition globally. We have clothes, we have all sorts of items, generators, all sorts of things, hygiene kits, or close to 500,000 hygiene kits, etc. Okay, and obviously if you zoom in, it will update the stock report on the basis of what you show, what you see. And if you further zoom in by clicking on one of those things, like you will have the stock updating as well. So you have now the question, the first answer to the question, who has what where? And from that, we can run analysis. So the first one, we analyze disaster in each country over the last 20 years. If I select here, for instance, Madagascar, if it wants to turn, Madagascar, and you can see here, you can drill down on the type of disaster. So you will see how many disasters and what types they were and how big they were and in which parts. And similarly, you can drill down at the provincial level. So you can have a view about how the country has been affected by disaster, the different disaster type. If you can select just the cyclone, here you have the cyclone, and you'll see everything is dynamic and will update accordingly. So that helps the decision maker to have an idea about how the country is mostly impacted. And generally people at national level, they don't need us to know that. They go through that, so they know, but it's useful information for the community. Now, when we have the stock information and we know what the stock is supposed to respond to based on the last 20 years, we can run an analysis. So we provide first the first overview of the stock. Is it the right location, right quantity, and an idea about how much stock they can, how many disaster percentage you can support based on the last 20 years. And then we can run analysis per item. So if I select a country like Honduras, for instance, I have no idea what will turn up, but I select, I don't know, dignity kits. I select a province, Atlantida. And if I want to reply to 55% of disaster, it will tell me my ideal stock. I have none of that at the moment, so I should bring more into Atlantida. And what we're trying to say to the community that before buying more stocks, well, it happens that you have other locations that are overstocked by far. And so instead of buying more, cost more money, more time, more carbon emission, probably better to relocate some of this stock to optimize this stock here in Francisco Morazan and to optimize this one as well without spending more time or more money. I've never done a presentation of the Stockholm platform that fast, but at least it gives you an idea of what it is. I would like to finish with a couple of thoughts before I leave the floor back. Much of the Stockholm analytic brain came from the model developed by Professor Jason Asimovich, as I said. But Jason is not a coder. He's just someone really passionate and willing to help optimize a humanitarian supply chain. And his model worked, but the code was not optimized. And that's where we needed help. So we contacted Gurobi initially just to explore the licensing. And we were very lucky to find Lindsay and her team. So they're generously responding positively, offering their license through their Gurobi Give Back program. But they went even further and they assigned a dedicated expert to help us refine and optimize Jason's code. And what came out of this really is a very effective and beautiful collaboration between the original designer, the platform designer that are based out of New Zealand, and the Gurobi optimization expert team. And the results are here. Honestly, we have a clean code, a solid code, a stronger system, delivering better performances. And for our users, that make a difference in the way they can make decisions. But we wanted to go further because I felt at the time that, I think a good collaboration is like a good negotiation, is one where all the party wins. And in that case, I felt that they gave us much more than we gave them. So I reached out back to Lindsay and I said, how much can we help a bit more to have a fair trade? And that's when she came back with this idea of this case study to showcase how the tool supported a complex humanitarian challenge. And that's how you find yourself into this webinar today. Two things to finish, and then I leave the floor back to Lindsay. All what you are going to discuss today, obviously, is about optimizing data, model, system, etc. That's not what this project is about. It is based on data, but it's really about collaboration. Today, as you probably know, half of the global humanitarian funding has vanished overnight after the US said dismantling. Many agencies are on the brink of disappearing or really challenging time. And there's a lot of talk about resetting the system, reshaping humanitarian industry, and we're really failing the risk to fall back on old habits. Just trying to do the same with a bit less, because that would be the easy way. Now we know we'll have more and more disaster, more and more frequent, more and more violent, with more and more affected people because of climate change. And that those will also feed more and more geopolitical trouble. So we know ahead we will have in our industry more disaster to respond to, with around half the capacity we had until January. And that's going to be a challenge. And we believe that if we try to do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 50 years without changing fundamentally the approach, it's not going to work. So this is our moment to reimagine, to innovate, to think about other ways of doing that. And one of the things is to take risk and not to shy away from that, because that would be a mistake. One of the things we have to explore is to engage with the private sector, but we need to do it smartly. I've seen many of my colleagues in the humanitarian sector trying to engage the private sector because they want the private sector to give them money. And I think that's a mistake. There's many other ways to engage with the private sector, and that would be a mistake because it would be replacing one dependency on USAID to another dependency to the private sector. So that is not the way forward, in my view. And the collaboration we just had with Gurobi shows another way. It shows that if we work smartly, we have a shared purpose, we can have technical exchange with mutual benefits. That's where, in our view, the collaboration with the private sector should move forward. So I leave you on that. You guys are from the private sector, from the academic world. You have ideas, you have model, you have resources, you have methodologies, and you have the capacity to help us transform this humanitarian industry. We have the knowledge, the experience on the field, the reality of how things work, and we can do this work together about letting you come with an idea, and we can help you fact check this idea with the reality and to optimize the different models and approach you have, so that whatever you come to define to help our industry will be in line with the realities of the field. So I say, let's not miss this opportunity to truly reshape the humanitarian action, not just the humanitarian actors, but all of you, hopefully in the future. And let's work about strategic collaboration. Thank you again to Lindsay and her team for this opportunity, and I really wish you a pleasant session and webinar. Thank you.
Thank you to Florent for that great introduction to ESUPS and the business problem that prompted this case study. Now, over to Jerry Yurchisin, our Senior Data Science Strategist at Gurobi, to showcase this important optimization project through our brand new educational case study.
Thanks, Lindsay. I would also like to thank Florent for taking the time to go into all that detail about his organization's mission and this project as well. I'd also like to thank everyone who had a hand in creating this. Before diving into the site, I'd like to take a minute to discuss the tools that were used to build this resource. The first is Read the Docs. Many of you may be familiar with this site. It provides free versioned hosting with automatic builds based right up from your Git repo, ensuring your documentation is always up to date and easily accessible. Gurobi has essentially converted all of its documentation to be hosted here, and this is where this resource is hosted as well. The next is Jupyter Book, and this natively combines narrative text and executable notebooks into a cohesive interactive site. Everyone's familiar with how great Jupyter notebooks are for doing something like that, but this takes Jupyter Book, makes it easy to create a website and other resources just by using markdown files and notebook files. And there are many ways to access Jupyter notebooks, but we felt this was like a great way to host these notebooks on the Read the Docs site. So now let's take a look at the case study itself. So, all right, now this is the moment that everyone's been waiting for. Let's actually take a look at this, at the case study and dive in. So as you can see at the very, very top, we have the URL gurobi-case study-esups.readthedocs.io. That'll get you here. First disclaimer, this is more or less an advanced draft version of this resource. So a lot is going to change. The text is going to change, the code may change, the structure of how things are put together may change, titles of things may change, all this sort of stuff may change. Plus, we may be adding on sort of additional resources for faculty who may be teaching from this or learners who may be diving in themselves. We're going to be hopefully adding in some more cool stuff there. That said, given that this is going to change, this is an opportunity for you to provide feedback. We would definitely like to know what you think is good, what you think needs improvement. And again, we'd be excited to hear about you, but things are going to change in this, and just keep this bookmarked, and you'll always be up for the latest and greatest here. So what we see at this page here is sort of a welcome to the case study. Gets a little bit into the info of what's happening and how this all comes together, the players that are involved and how they're all working together a little bit. But the main thing is this just gives you an outline of the structure of what you can see here. So depending on what you want people to look at, or what you want to look at yourself, you can sort of dive right in. So you see on the left here, we have a left-hand bar here that sort of shows the overall structure of all the resources. Again, this is all composed of markdown files and Jupyter notebooks, and you can sort of see where they see how it's all put together and dive into what you want to when you want to. We also have a sort of similar structure of the table of contents here, so you can again dive in right from the welcome page as well. And here you'll sort of see at the bottom some acknowledgments. Again, I want to thank Ben Rapkin for putting together a lot of this information, putting it all into a nice digestible form, and really putting a lot of character into this to really sort of show the importance of of optimization of this project and how it all comes together. So thank you very much, Ben. And again, thanks to everyone else listed here, a lot of names, for being involved in this project. So let's move on to some of the background material on the platform, the STOCKHOLM platform. So this, again, gets into a lot of the information that Florent has been talking about already. So I'm not going to dive into this into detail yet again. But again, it's never a bad idea to remind yourself what's important from this problem and understanding the background and understanding the origins of the organization and things today. So I'll move on from here rather quickly though. The next section is an introduction to the case study. So this is where we really sort of dive into the outline of what you'll find here. Sort of what are the important parts that this is going to talk about, again, from a full end-to-end exploration of the case study context. So first, you're going to talk about the business context, the story, understanding, again, more of the background, then getting into optimization modeling. That's where that's where the Gurobi part fits into this, and understanding how these things all come together, and as you'll see in a little while, what we the approach that we took was we wanted to make sure that anyone at any level of optimization, whether you're sort of you've been doing it for a while or if this is your absolute first time seeing optimization, there is going to be a place for you to jump in. And not only will you be able to jump in, but you'll be able to jump in with some hands-on exercises. And that's the great part of Jupyter Notebooks, and which is why we went with JupyterBook as a way to sort of compose this and put this all together. And I'll sort of show some features of that in a little while. And then predictive analytics, that's always a great thing to discuss within the context of prescriptive analytics. So when you're talking about optimization, obviously it's great to be able to give your optimization model the best data to make the best decisions possible. And given that to get that information, predictive analytics is a great way to do that. So we do also talk about how to incorporate the two maybe, and what might be good for you and your course or you're interested in learning. There's ways to do it. And then we also talked about impact and implementation and things like that. So one thing that we do dive into I'll show a little bit of this, is production level code, so you can see what that really looks like. And I'll talk about it more later, but production level code is something that is, coding is it's very much an art. How you do it may be completely different than how somebody else does it. And they'll both work perfectly, so that's the interesting thing. So again, when you dive into that section, this is just one instance of production level code, and I'll ramble on about that again as well. So diving into the case study in Jupyter Notebook, a lot of information again here, sort of what you can expect, and given a little bit more background as well. Again, a lot of this is kind of has already been covered. What's interesting now here is again with what we do talk about, and it's very important, is again to compare and contrast machine learning, predictive analytics with prescriptive and optimization. So a lot of if you're not coming from an operations research or industrial engineering sort of course or that background, you may be thinking, well, why not just throw neural networks at this? Why not take this approach? Why not take that approach? We sort of dive into that here and sort of talk about why machine learning and neural networks can be a bit of an issue for trying to solve a problem like this. Talk about data interpolation and how that's may not be the best way to approach this. It kind of comes down to, if your data has never seen optimal, how is it going to tell you what optimal is, and things like that. So definitely check out this section. We talk about how important machine learning is and how great it is to solve certain problems. But again, very much sort of focusing on the right tool for the right job. And if you sort of think about how complex this decision problem is, sort of see that it's very important to understand why optimization is a great approach. And we talk about why it is a great approach. Sort of talking about how it is a very structured approach for this type of problem, and getting into a little bit more of the information of what is an optimization problem, so you can get a little bit of reading, get a little bit beforehand. If you are very new to optimization, this is a great section to dive into as well, and to get, again, to start understanding the bits and pieces there. Again, and then from a learning perspective, if you're interested in learning some of the more important pieces of mathematical optimization, we give some background there. So we talk about the simplex method and how it's integral to solving linear program problems, and giving some visualizations and things like that. So this is a great sort of supplemental piece here. And let's see, and move on. Let's move on to a little bit more of some other optimization approaches, so you can get a real sort of clear view of what can be talked about in terms of optimization and this case study, and how you may want to extend it if you wanted to do sort of more sophisticated problems, or if you have a problem that mirrors this, but it has some differences there. How can you sort of incorporate that? But we do also talk about some other types of optimization problems, so things like mixed integer, linear program, giving that definition and some examples there. What is a quadratic program? What is quadratically constrained programs? Sort of understanding what each of these things are, and how they and the types of problems that they solve, and how that may differ from the problem that we have at hand here. So let's now move on to setting up the problem. This is where we finally get some code. So there's a lot of text and background information and sort of preliminary reading and understanding of the problem, which again is exceptionally important for this. But now let's get into some code, and let's understand what we have here. So there's a lot of background information, a lot of supplemental stuff here. So I'm just going to sort of focus on, and I can sort of talk through this while we're going through the code. This section is all about reading in the data that's going to be used, and sort of visualizing it, so we can really understand what information we have and how that incorporates again into the optimization problem. So the data that we have is we start with looking at some disasters that occurred in Madagascar. So the whole ESUPS problem that's trying to be solved is a very large problem, spanning a bunch of countries, a bunch of areas, with a bunch of supplies and a bunch of things that we're trying to allocate. That's a very big problem, and can make things a little bit more difficult to understand, sort of going through the first time. So we reduce the problem, we narrow it down to make it a little bit easier to digest and to understand. So the data that we're going to look at is for right now is just the country of Madagascar. So again, we're really narrowing it down so we could sort of get a good view of sort of the detail that's here, and make it understandable. So let's read in some data. So we have data on disasters again for Madagascar, and so we have approximate locations, the type, and also the number of people impacted. We have warehouse data as well, and you can sort of see in the big yellow note, this has been sort of modified a little bit. The warehouse data has been modified again for some safety purposes. We don't want to be putting in exact locations, so there has been some fudging of those of those numbers there. But we have warehouse data, and again, I'm talking about how vast this problem is. And we talked about there's a whole bunch of different sort of supplies and resources that are needed to to be shipped and moved along to respond to these disasters. Again, to narrow it down and make it a little bit easier, we are just going to be talking about one piece of information, and that's buckets. In the long run, that's what we have right now. We're going to be talking about buckets. So let's explore the data. So this is essentially a visualization of where the warehouses are and where are the events that occur. And what's nice about working here is that we're using Plotly. Plotly is great for interactive maps, and it works here just as easy as you would think any Plotly map would work, sort of that you would run yourself. So you can sort of zoom in and see where things are and get an understanding of where the warehouses are, where certain types of disasters have occurred, and get a sense of essentially just where is everything. That's the name of the section, pretty aptly titled. The next thing is what supplies are available. This gives a quick distribution of all the supplies and what is left, or what is available. So again, as I mentioned, we're just going to be focusing on buckets from here on out, but there are 15 item types that are available. And again, this case study is as a whole, the problem sort of assumes that it's sufficient to analyze each of these things independently. So we just look at buckets on its own, and then the same process would be then looped through and repeated for each of the things that are in the supplies. So let's look at the supplies. And so we read that data in here. And again, we have another interactive map. So we could see where things are, see approximate locations, and how much we have. So great, now we have an understanding of where supplies are. Now let's look at the impact. So we looked at where the disasters occurred, but we didn't really look at the size of them. We had the information, you saw the table, but let's look at some of the individual disasters, and you sort of see then there's the size of the circle is given by the number of people affected. So you can see where the larger disasters occurred, and what type they were, and where they were in the country. So we have visualizations on the supplies that we have in buckets. We have a visualization on sort of the scale of people impacted. Let's sort of put those two together so we could see, okay, is sort of supply meeting demand in a sense? And what we see is no, not really, not necessarily. It's a difficult problem, and making sure that we have all of the resources available where they need to be is a very difficult thing. The disaster bubbles now, or circles, are now sort of scaled by the number of supplies that are needed in order to meet the demand in that area for that disaster. So I believe it's 2.5 bucket, or excuse me, one bucket serves essentially on average 2.5 people. So we sort of scale that up to put them on the same scale. So you can see again that the disasters, the resources needed via when a disaster occurs tends to be a lot more than what's available in that exact area at that exact time. So now we sort of see what we saw what the data looks like. We have an idea of, okay, we're looking at Madagascar. We have an idea of what's going on here. We have an idea of some of the data that's involved. We understand the platform, or what's going to be going into the Stockholm platform, a little bit better. Now let's take a step back from that and understand the evolution a little bit of Stockholm, because one of the harder problems in analytics is making sure that you can communicate the importance of things and communicate the problem and communicate the solutions and get everyone on the same page. Visualization tools are great for that, but creating great visualization tools is 100% an iterative process. So So now what we're going to do is we're going to sort of read through some of the important metrics. This gives you an opportunity to read through some of the important metrics of the Stockholm platform, and what they're looking at and why. What we have here is a sort of a screen cap of a very early version of Stockholm, and we can sort of see that maybe there's some improvements that can be that can be had here, but it's really important to make sure that you're able to use the tools that you have on hand to get stuff going, and that really builds momentum to help create more robust, fancier, cooler, whatever word you want to use, but more impactful tools. So start with what you have, build the case for it, and that's exactly what they did. So this was just a quick look at an early version. Now this is something that's using Power BI is a great way to visualize and allow for additional drill down of events, and what we have here is what we're looking at is a disaster analysis. Again, this is what Florent was talking about now, about how you're able to drill down, you're able to get to all this great information very quickly, and granularly as well. You can see how detailed it can be. So it's a real cool thing, and it's all here. Let's move on to and there's one more screen cap as well. So let's move on to the optimization part of it, and you look at here, and we're going to start with an introduction to the optimization model. Okay, that's great. But what if this is your first time really looking at optimization, and some of the jargon that I used earlier before about constraints and decision variables, that's not where I need to start at step 0. This is more of a step 1. Then we provided another notebook here for just an introduction to optimization, to modeling optimization problems. So this is very basic, very start from scratch type of stuff here. And we really talk about the bits and pieces, how they come together, and it's a great place to start. And you may be thinking, okay, it'd be a great place to start this. I have an example where we want to the context of this problem is I want to buy a certain number of hot dogs and sodas that maximize sort of my utility, in a sense, and I value them both equally, but I have a budget. Very basic, interesting optimization problem. This is what it looks like, and here's the code in Gurobi Pi that helps you sort of do that. And you're looking at this and be like, okay, I'm adding, I'm creating a model, I'm adding decision variables, adding constraints, so on and so forth. But wouldn't it be great if I could just dive into this in an interactive way? That's what's great about JupyterBook, is you can open this in Colab, and now all of a sudden you can do this in an interactive way. So all of this is here. Now you can dive in, and we have 2 modeling examples, and it gives you the option to then look at some practice problems as well, where you're able to sort of go through a problem that we design here, and you're able to write the code yourself to really get an understanding of how optimization works. And then of course we give you a solution too. We have a second practice problem that's a little bit more related to the case study. And again, here is the answer as well. So it's a great way to learn and understand optimization if you're coming in from the very basics. So back to our problem. So, oops, I got a little ahead of myself here. So we have there we go. So we have the basic model here, where what we're trying to do is we are trying to make sure that we can meet demand. This is essentially a transportation problem. If you're familiar with those traditional archetypes. We have I as a set of warehouses. We're going to say tau I is the driving time to ship a single item from warehouse I to a disaster. B BI is the starting inventory at each warehouse, and D is the demand that we have. So we're going to define our decision variable here, yi, as the number of supplies to send from each individual warehouse. So we want to do this at minimal cost, and cost is here proportional to driving time here. So we have a very basic linear program where we're trying to minimize this objective, and here are our constraints. And so very basic. And again, this non-negativity thing is sort of implied in the code, so you don't need to put it, but it is important to make sure that you write that in your formulation. So here is code to make the model. Again, reading in the data again, and we're defining sort of the key parameters, creating the model, creating the decision variables, adding our constraints. So this is the demand constraint here, this is the warehouse constraint here, and setting the objective, creating the objective, setting the objective, and firing it up to optimize. And we can take a look at the results, where we see this is sorted by the driving time compared to where. So we have one particular disaster that occurs, and in one particular location. It happens to be the same location as where a depot city or a warehouse is. So you can look at how basic, a basic problem like this, you can sort of solve this with sort of a greedy sort. But as we get a little bit more complicated, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But we have a base problem here. The next problem that we look at is we sort of take this into sort of a step 2. Let's include all disasters and have this more of a scenario optimization. Let's optimize for. Let's create one optimization model that represents each of the disasters that we have in our data set. So this is a step 2 model that incorporates the probabilities of each event. And the way that it's set up right now is we have historical data on a bunch of events that occurred in the past. We're sort of looking forward now as if all of those events may happen in the future with equal likelihood. So that's an assumption that we make right here, but it is a great place to expand with some predictive modeling that would estimate likelihoods of certain types of events in certain areas, and also estimate possibly the number of people impacted. There's a great, you can create data and you can do a whole bunch of stuff to really sort of add to this here. But and the great thing is the optimization model still pretty much stays the same. You don't have to change anything. But now we have so now we have a little bit different of an optimization model. So instead of just this tau I yi, now we have to take into consideration each scenario or each disaster k. So let k be the set of disasters, and k is the index for the disaster at hand, a particular storm, a particular earthquake or epidemic. And we are assuming that each of these sort of creates the same demand, which again may not be the most realistic. But again, it's just changing input data. It's not changing the optimization model. So so now this gives us a new objective function. Now we're trying to minimize the sum of tau ik, yik over summation over those two indices. So now we're trying to minimize the total cost or the total travel time over all scenarios for moving stuff from a particular warehouse to a given location. And now this is accounting for randomness, so we are talking a little bit about expected value. This may be something that is new to you. So again, we have a quick little supplemental notebook here, more on expected value. So if you need to understand this concept a little bit better or want a refresher, this is a great place to start. And we sort of go through some very basic problems on expected value, give you some cool little like coin flip games, simple dice games, so the games of chance, and we sort of lay these out lay out these problems for you, and give you an opportunity to sort of work through them yourself, and then provide an answer so you can check to see how your solution stacks up. And there's a bunch of these. We have intermediate problems as well, and then of course we got to leave the advanced problems to you to sort of figure out on your own. So let's go back to where we were here, including all the disasters and randomness. So now we have a probability of a certain event occurring here, and the travel time. So this is now our new optimization problem. We're going to minimize this total expected cost, and everything else still stays the same, but we're meeting the demand for each scenario, okay? Let's look at it. We have now a full warehouse data. We could look at all of it. And now we have a distance matrix for the scenario, for each individual scenario and each warehouse. So if something happens, if scenario 0 happens, here's the distance matrix. If scenario 21 happens, here's the distance matrix. And it's all not in a matrix really, but it's in a nice data frame. So this gives a little bit more information here, so we can sort of see what the demand is. This has been a little bit simplified, the demand. We're assuming that there's 2.5 people addressed per bucket, but we only have a certain number of buckets, so the demand is either going to be the max of the max capacity that we have, which we're assuming is this number, this 4811, or that's the max that we have, or some lower number based off of the number of people impacted. Here's the model and the solution, what we're sending. And then here's some ideas for data science extension. Because this is, again, let me get in a good spot here. There we go. Data science extension here. So this is, again, what are some models, what are some ways, what are some other things that you can incorporate to really bring some more cool stuff to this estimation of that likelihood, or that's kind of a tough thing to do, I'd say, but maybe other problems like estimating the impact could be something that's a little bit easier to do or more relevant, but again, up to you. So now let's put everything together. Again, what I've been talking about so far has been started out as a very simple transportation problem. Then we expanded it a little bit to talk about probability, so it's a scenario optimization. Now let's put it all together with one other thing, because what if we, this one constraint right here where we had yi must be less than or equal to bi. We can only ship out as much, to meet demand. We can only ship out as much as we have. Well, what if this is a decision variable? And that's what this part of what this notebook looks into, is like, what if this b is something that's not a fixed number? What if we decide what that is? And so we have everything's exactly the same except for 2. Now this bound on y is something that we can decide, but we have a fixed number that we can allocate. So now here's the code for that problem as well, and the solution. And you can see that things aren't as evenly distributed. We're sort of really putting some heavy amounts of stuff in certain areas. But again, this is a very sort of a basic problem. If you have more things going on, then you may have slightly different answers. But again, here's what it looks like in a data frame. And then let's finish up with incorporating something called travel mode. You have different ways to ship things, different ways to move. This is a natural extension and something that we sort of leave to you to sort of work with. We will be providing some data for this in the future, but it's not right here right now. But you'll be able to sort of expand the problem again yourself to minimize the total cost given different ways of shipping things. And then interpreting the solution, super important. There are some metrics that Stockholm uses to understand how well things are going right now compared to what would be an optimal solution. So read through this to understand how they work through this. And then wrapping it up, more sort of information about what would, sort of putting a bow on the problem. The last thing I want to mention is the production code. I'm going to sort of go through this really quickly. Production code is super important for these three reasons that we have up on top. It improves readability. It definitely improves robustness, and making sure that things work and don't break as you sort of move from version to version, and really helps with testing. So there's a nice little production flow here, and then you can scroll through a whole bunch of really well-written code. I will not take credit for this. And then lastly, we have a little bit of a math sort of addendum that's probably going to change. We're going to add this, but things like understanding branch and bound and how that works compared to linear programming, we have a little bit of an explanation there as well, and other things to dive into from there. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of cool things to look into, and that's where this resource sort of stands right now. Again, it's going to change. We're going to add to it. There's even more stuff I'm scrolling through that I didn't even talk about. But definitely check out this resource. Let us know what you think, and we'll be glad to hear from you. Thank you again for taking the time to go through this. We really hope this is something that you're going to utilize. And again, we're very open to your feedback and questions and everything like that. So again, thank you very much. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. Thanks for sitting through and listening along. Now we're going to take a little bit of do a little Q&A session, answer some of your questions. So I'll get things started. First question to you, Florent. Is the Stockholm platform publicly accessible, and how is the stock data refreshed?
Okay, thanks a lot for the presentation and for the first tricky question. No, unfortunately, the Stockholm platform is not available publicly for obvious security reasons. You don't want to have an information that there's 30 tons of food in a warehouse where people are starving. It would put people and staff at risk. So it is on registration only. We keep a stock record of the stock on the 1st of every month for academic research purposes. So if anyone is interested, we're happy to share this. That's what it's used for. We will just hide a few sensitive information, and there's no GPS pinpoint location on that. So we're happy to help on that level, but sometimes we give an access to very specific research, academic research, specifically linked to Humanitarian stock. So it's very narrow. In that case, we can make a few exceptions, but otherwise it's a non-public platform. And in terms of data update, we have started the process of building interface application with the main humanitarian organization having stock, like UNHCR, UNICEF, UNHRD, etc., and some of the Red Cross movement and others, so that they don't have to have a double handling of updating their stock in their own system and in the Stockholm platform. So it's in the process. It's been a little bit slowed down with the US funding cuts, but it's resuming now. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. And good job for the great presentation.
Thank you. Yep. That definitely does provide some great context. Thanks for clearing that up.
Mm-hmm. So the next questions are more directed to the learning experience. First one. What prior knowledge or experience is recommended for students to effectively engage with the ESUPS case study?
I'd say that the main thing that we don't really cover in this resource is Python programming. So if you are someone who's never programmed in Python before, that may be the one limiting experience. Outside of that, I think this is a very all-encompassing sort of start from scratch resource, even in terms of optimization. We put in a few things there to make understanding and learning optimization easy and accessible. So even just within the resource itself, you can see the some very basic optimization sort of modeling problems. And additionally, we link to a lot of our Gurobi resources too to help you sort of get started there. So so I'd say not even optimization is something that's necessarily required. So I'd say Python programming and just the enthusiasm to dive into such a cool use case.
Mm-hmm. The next one is probably more related to Florent. Is it possible that you might also consider the supplier selection problem, the trade-off between cost efficiency, generally using international suppliers to profit from the scale, and boosting local economy, choosing local suppliers and smallholders seem to be challenging?
Some people have been following. That's great. Yes, absolutely. So that's the next phase. I mean, we need to have the platform come to a solid state enough situation, which the work with Gurobi has really helped onto that. And it's primarily focusing on humanitarian organizations so that they can provide their data. The next step is to include the stock of the private sector, because the idea is to give an overview of all the stock available, not only the humanitarian stock, but obviously there's a lot of stock in countries, and we know national suppliers, etc., participate into that. So we want to include them into the platform. And yes, on the longer term and with the work with partners, the idea is to help the local economy develop. I won't take too much time, but very briefly, many local suppliers do not produce the standard we need to have to humanitarian response because there's not enough volume to develop a production line. So if we give them the scale to improve their volume by joining forces in procurement, that will help the process of favoring the consideration of local suppliers in our own supplies.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Cool. So there's one other question that just popped in is, I think, Florent, again, this would be probably for you. It is indicated that organizations adjust their inventory level for understock and overstock cases. But are there any other cases? For example, in winter, storms are more likely. In summer, fires are more likely. So based on this, do organizations reallocate the resources? If so, what is the effect on the cost?
So not yet. We have not included the seasonality as such. I mean, there's some elements where we have. So for instance, the number of blankets per person is different if you look at the situation in Nepal than if you look at the situation in the Pacific. So those kind of factors have been factored in. And again, that's part of the next phase we're about to build. We're about to generate a new model, a mathematical model with academic partners from Canada and Turkey that will look specifically at anticipation recommendation. So the one we provide at the moment are long-term strategy recommendation, collective. The next one will be specifically once we have information about a coming event. So for instance, we know 6 months in advance that 6 days in advance that there's a cyclone coming, there will be specific recommendation provided to relocate stock in preparation to responding to those to these events, but not specifically on long-term seasonality because it's a bit more tricky to do at the moment.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Thanks for clearing that up too. That was something I was wondering as well.
Next question might also be relevant to many people, where one can download the presentation just given.
Mm-hmm. So I believe that the recording is going to be sort of immediately accessible. So you should be able to get that pretty quickly. In terms of a presentation, we only had a couple slides, so we're not providing that as well. So I don't know, Lindsay, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, the recording will be available within the hour. Use the same link you used to join.
Great. All right, let's see. Any other questions that have popped up? Let me see. I think we may have answered them all then. Great. Well then, thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today. Hope you learned a lot. I did, even hearing it again for the 10th time. And we really hope you enjoy the resource. Check out, and we definitely value your feedback. So let us know what you think. And I don't know, Lindsay, if there's anything else you want to wrap up with.
Yeah, we will be sending a survey out tomorrow. So again, if you have feedback about this as a learning resource or a teaching resource, we would love to hear it. And thank you to everyone involved. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing everyone on the next academic webinar. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.